In this video, we'll do a malware overview. Malware is malicious software. This type of software gets installed and runs on a machine without user consent or through trickery. Malicious user motivations for creating, deploying, and using malware comes from financial purposes, bragging rights. There could be political or ideological reasons why they are executing these types of infections, or simply for reconnaissance to learn more about a potential target that they want to compromise. Malware types come in many forms. We could have viruses, which attach themselves to files, worms, which are self-propagating over the network using standard file sharing methods, or Trojans, which essentially look not suspicious, but rather they look legitimate, they look benign, but they in fact contain a malware payload. Or we could have spyware that monitors our activity, for example, our web surfing habits or our banking habits. But how does a malware infection actually occur? Well, this list is just the tiniest of samplings. There are many ways this can occur. One way is by people downloading BitTorrents, whether they're downloading the latest movie that's in the theaters that perhaps they really shouldn't be doing due to copyright laws, or they're downloading things that they otherwise would need to pay for legitimately. Often, with a BitTorrent download, indeed, it does contain what the user was looking for. For example, the latest theatrical release of a movie, but at the same time when that movie is run, it could be executing malware in the background unbeknownst to the user. Even viewing a website in some cases can infect a machine without even clicking anything on the site. This is often called a drive-by infection. Now, it does depend, of course, on the website and its nature of malicious content, but it also depends on the user's web browser and how it's configured. Now, certainly, if the user gets a message about their computer being infected, and then they click on a link to run a scan, which in itself is really infecting their machine, that's the user actively clicking on something. But there are times when the user doesn't have to click on anything and their machine can still be infected. So installing software that seems benign, such as, for instance, a virus scanner or any type of free software especially. Clicking a website link that a user might receive in an email. And often these are targeted to users, and the text in the message is often convincing to trick the user into thinking this is specifically for them, maybe to reset a banking account password or so on. Opening file attachments should also be approached with suspicion. Unless we are expecting a specific file attachment, we should be very careful as to whether or not we're going to open it. Symptoms of a malware infection include things like performance degradation on the machine, so the machine slows down. We might also get email notifications regarding abnormal account usage, and it might actually be legitimate. We might get an email notification from our bank or PayPal or our email account, whether it's Google or Outlook.com, but we have to be careful. Because how do we know that this email notification itself isn't some form of social engineering or trickery? Any unexpected change settings on a machine could potentially indicate an infection. It could also have been pushed centrally by an administrator's configuration change. However, things like web browser start pages being changed and not being able to be changed back, or processes running in the background that we're not familiar with, potentially could indicate an infection. But you want to be careful because sometimes they could be legit. Any unexpected newly installed web browser plugins could also be an indication of an infection, as are disabled software update mechanisms. A malware toolkit facilitates the creation of malware for a malicious person. And there are many of them out there, believe it or not. So for instance, the Blackhole exploit kit contains tools and tutorials and documentation on how to create and propagate malware. There are also underground chat rooms on the internet that are available, and of course membership is by invitation only, where there is actually malware for sale to the highest bidder. So how do we mitigate malware? Number one, user awareness and training. Everybody in the organization needs to be in the know about understanding how easy it is to infect a machine, even through trickery or social engineering. We should also make sure we've got up-to-date anti-malware scanning on all devices, including smartphones. The same thing is true for personal firewalls. It needs to be on every device, looking at traffic coming into the device and leaving the device, even at the smartphone level. We should always, within the corporation, limit use of removable media because that's one way that infections can be brought into an environment. Of course, your anti-malware scanner might pick it up before it causes damage. We should also limit internet file downloads and be very suspicious when opening links in email messages as well as opening file attachments from email messages. Common malware products, or rather anti-malware products, include those from Kaspersky, McAfee, Sophos, AVG, and Windows Defender. Now, just because we might be using a free anti-malware solution like Windows Defender doesn't necessarily mean it's not as good as some of the paid solutions. Now, of course, with a malware solution at the enterprise level, we want some kind of centralized way to deploy and control the configuration of our anti-malware and also have some kind of central notification and reporting mechanism available. Now, in that case, you might have to pay for a solution that does that. But just because you're paying for an anti-malware solution doesn't necessarily mean it's better than the free ones. In this video, we discussed malware.